and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome everyone to Irreverent. It's me, Jamie Franklin, and Daniel French. I haven't been on for a while now, Daniel, so it's good to have you back. We've just done a really massive long catch-up episode for supporters, for the legendary supporters on Collard. But just in a few words, Daniel, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. I'm here at the university Monday to Thursday. I've got a staff flat, which is here.
Very white.
Very unfurnished. So it does look a bit, yeah.
It's a bit.
It does look a bit sort of.
It's a bit bland.
Category D prison, you know.
You need
Jeffrey Archer, what he got in his last week in prison, but no, it's.
I thought you were going to say Jeffrey Epstein for a minute.
Yeah, well, now he had a smaller cell than that.
I would imagine.
Yeah. No, so I've been here for 2 months, and just beginning to get to grips with the job.
So you're at the University of Greenwich, which has taken over. I know it's meant to be a merger, but it's actually taken over our undergraduate university, University of Kent, hasn't it? Which is
I'm going to a staff meeting this afternoon, actually, where department by department, the Vice Chancellor is explaining the ramifications for this. I'm told it's quite. I think Kent's more jittery than Greenwich.
Definitely,
because they're going to get Greenwich's Vice Chancellor this time round.
Yeah.
And they may feel the poorer partner in this. But, combined with the Medway and Christchurch, it's 50,000 students.
Wow, it's a big place.
I think it's going to make it one of the biggest unis.
Probably in the world.
Yeah, in the world. Yeah, 50,000.
We're definitely in the country.
Pretty big. Huge, I mean, huge. I think Greenwich here, between the two campuses at Avery Hill and here, is about 15,000 students.
Well, there we go. And also, Daniel, you wanted to give a quick shout out. We did do it on Uncollared, but we'll do it again to the people who are at the Speak Life conference, the responding to the Quiet Revival conference. It was also Langham Place, wasn't it, the weekends? And there was a shout out at the conference of people who listened to Irreverent. Out of about 70 people, you reckon about 50 people put their hands up.
Yeah, it was fantastic actually. There was, when Justin Briley said, and Irreverent, there was a way. And he asked a show of hands, and I was pleasantly surprised. Actually,
I feel encouraged by that.
I'd be very encouraged by that, Jamie. And just to doing the rounds in the lunch breaks, just chatting to people, you do get a sense that we are known.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I think sometimes you're making the podcast, people are listening because you can see the stats, but it just doesn't feel like people are listening. Do you know what I mean?
No,
because you just put the episode out and all you see is a number, and obviously you get some comments and things like that on YouTube, or people email you, and we do encourage people to email reverendpod@gmail.com. But obviously the vast majority of people just listen to it and then go about their business. But then I suppose that's kind of normal, isn't it? When I listen to a podcast, I don't email the person who made it and say, oh, that was a really good podcast, I really enjoyed it. You just listen to it and then you get on with things. But it's quite a strange feeling, isn't it, making podcasts?
No, I know. I mean, I was able to share on the podium that the impact of the podcast has been really interesting in terms of the reader feedback and the emails that we get, the Ask the Rev and whatnot. I think there's a substantial sense of data there. We began the Speak Life conference looking at the Quiet Revival data from one of the Bible Society officers, which was interesting. And as she was sort of going through the graphs and that, I was thinking, that the sheer volume of inquiries that we've had and testimonies and sharing of newfound faith and curiosity to faith, that if we're seeing a tiny slither through our small window, if what we're seeing is valid, then there is definitely something on the move, and that to me confirms that something is happening of God in the last 4 or 5 years.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. We've definitely seen something, haven't we? We're going to talk about this because we are actually, in some ways, this is going to be a sort of retrospective and bringing up to date episode because we're going to talk about the COVID inquiry findings, and of course, that's when our podcast started was during that time, and then we're going to go on to talk about, I suppose, engagement today, particularly the Church of England. We're going to talk about the article about the Reverend Kate Bottley, which was in the Telegraph, and we're going to talk about the BBC article, which is called "Why Tommy Robinson Supporters Are Turning to Christianity." So all of these themes are going to come up in the course of this episode. But first, shall we start with our Bible reading? Because we always like to frame things through Scripture and to turn our hearts to the Lord before we have such conversations. So I encourage listeners now, if they'd like to, we'll say the Lord's Prayer, and then we're going to read. We're going to read the Gospel reading, which is from the Revised Lectionary for the first Sunday of Advent. So this week it's very challenging reading, actually, if you actually read it and take it seriously. Matthew 24:36 to 44 is one of Christ's apocalyptic discourses. Which is about the end of the world. There's no other way of putting it. It's about his second coming. So we'll read that in a moment, but encourage listeners to pray with us now as we say the Lord's Prayer together. So let us pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. So, Matthew 24:36 to 44. This is Christ speaking here. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as with the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. It's a very interesting passage. A couple of things
so.
just by way of exegesis, which I think are really interesting. So the bit where Christ says, for as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. I've heard it said that that means that like there'll be sort of Nephilim and stuff like that just immediately prior to the second coming. I really don't think that that's what this means in context, because Christ actually tells us what he means immediately after he says it. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. So ordinary life was going on until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So it's like it's actually a picture of people just getting on with their lives, and seemingly the majority of people being unaware. And then this cataclysmic, literally, the word actually, I don't have my Greek New Testament in front of me. I was studying.
Yeah, I've got it here.
Yeah. So, like, I think the word for flood in verse 39 is kataklysmos, which is obviously where we get the word cataclysm from. And in the original Greek, that word kataklysmos.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that means like a complete covering. It means something that's comprehensive in nature. So, like something like the flood. Literally, the flood is comprehensive. It covers absolutely everything. And so Christ is saying that's what the return of the Son of Man is going to be. It's going to be a cataclysm in that comprehensive sense, in the sense it's going to absolutely cover everything is going to be relativized by it. Everything is going to be seen in the light of it, and it's going to change absolutely everything, like the flood. And most people will be unaware. Most people are just getting on with things. And so it's really interesting to sort of grapple with that when you think about what does that actually mean. As if I'm to then, as he goes on to say later on, I stay awake and be alert and all these kind of things. That's going to be in the context of the majority of people not being alert, not being awake. Like Noah, building his ark, and people thinking, what on earth is this guy doing building this ark? He's crazy. For Christians, we've got to have a bit of that about us as well. We've got to be ready to be different, frankly, different, and having different priorities, a different mindset, because we're not just existing in the way that Christ describes in this passage, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. We obviously we do those things. We do engage in ordinary life. We have to. But there's also this other thing that's coming that Christ says you have to have your eye on that. You have to be preparing for that. You have to be awake to that reality.
Yeah,
Just one more
I,
thing.
I was interested at this Speak Live
Yeah.
conference that I was at that we didn't really touch upon this. And I know this can be more the purview of, say, uh, evangelical eschatology. But we didn't touch upon it at all. And I felt, is the quiet revival just happening because the quiet revival is just happening? And, well, God thought it would be nice to have a bit of an upturn.
Yes.
And, there are various sociological reasons, the collapse of new atheism, the way the world feels a bit wobbly at the moment, and so on. Or is this a preparation for a more greater civilizational crisis that
Yeah.
God is emboldening a few more into the church so that we may have leadership, that we may have shepherds, and I thought that was that was a bit undercooked really at Speak Live. I mean, we needed 2 or 3 days really to explore these things, but it's very easy, isn't it, to have a kind of very safe Christianity when you look at the history of the world and to think that things will just plod on forever
Exactly.
as they are. And maybe in the 22nd century we'll have teleportation and robots that serve us tea,
Yeah.
and we'll do that on Mars, and that will be progress. And maybe we'll live a bit longer, and we'll just toddle on, and the church will have up times and down times. But I think a large part of the New Testament is a window into this catastrophe, the sense in which part of God's mercy, as in the time of Noah, it is this. Well, yeah, you can argue that in the time of the Nephilim, however you look at that historically, that you can interpret it as the world is in such a bad place that only the flood will rescue us.
Yes, exactly.
And what is it like to be in that kind of situation where we pine for the catastrophe of God to bring us to our senses, to awaken us, to draw us into a new heaven and a new earth, not of our own making, not a utopia that we have fashioned, but one that God gives, exclusively. And I think so much of mainstream Christianity at the moment has been very safe on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
I think I remember you saying a while ago, Daniel, about Anglicanism, that it's a real weakness of Anglicanism for all its strengths, is that there's not much eschatological thought. And that comment has really stayed with me, particularly when I preach these passages. We had, I think it was actually from the Gospel of Luke, a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking about things like, the Antichrist and the mark of the beast, and we don't know, but look at the signs of the times and all of these, and talking about the global developments and how really Christ's words could only really come true like either now in history or later, because it's talking about some kind of global system and all this kind of stuff. But when I do that, I have to confess that I feel really weird, because I think there aren't many Anglicans who really have written about this stuff kind of theologically. But you would think, like most vicars, even though we have all these passages, every Advent we have passages like this, we don't really hear very much about this.
No, it's like vicars are embarrassed by all this stuff. It's Advent. I'm really sorry. We're going to have to do this cringeworthy stuff, this apocalyptic text, because, well, that's kind of what our medieval forefathers did, and it's nice to keep to the tradition. And it kind of sticks 2 fingers up at the whole Christmassy scene, but actually, I don't really believe any of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm a kind of Teilhard de Chardin Christian who thinks that technology will save us eventually. Yes. And it's kind of sort of related to the Holy Spirit in some sort of way, in some sort of nicey thing. And we'll all get along anyway in the long term, and it's all going to be nice. And maybe Jesus will come and rubber stamp our efforts in the future.
Yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
you just read the text, I mean, this is this thing like I don't want to be too self-indulgent here, but I've been now in this post now about 2.5 years. It's my first full-time post as a vicar, and all I do when I preach my sermon, partly because I just don't have time to do anything else, which I think is probably a good thing, is I read the gospel. I read all the passages, read the gospel passage mainly, and focus on that, and just think to myself, like, what does this gospel passage mean? And then how can I apply it to the people? That's just all I do. So with this, if I take this seriously, like Christ actually said this, what does he mean? Like, he can't mean that technology is going to, usher in some kind of utopia, or that we're going to sort of achieve the resurrection by ourselves, or some kind of one of these funny, ideas that came about in the 20th century. He means exactly what he says, which
Yeah.
is that there is going to be a cataclysmic event when he returns, and most people won't be aware of it. So you are supposed to be aware of it, and you're supposed to wake up and stay awake spiritually, so that when it happens, you'll be prepared. He could not be clearer. And the other thing as well, and this is the thing where I think there's a slight incongruence with the Anglican way, because the Anglican way has this emphasis on the Gospels. Anglican theology historically, and I would say nowadays as well, it does place this emphasis on, we have the Gospel reading at the center of the service, and the sermon is usually about the Gospel reading. So why is it that when it comes to literally the words of Christ and literally him saying these things as clearly as they can possibly be said, that we never really take it seriously? We don't heed these words. All I'm saying is, like, if Christ was here, if he was like over there in my room now and he said this to me, I'd take it seriously. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I wonder like how
Yeah. I think he means
symbolically.
it symbolically in my heart.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that
Yeah.
and that's again another way of decaffeinating the whole thing. I've
Mm.
heard that, that sermons essentially kind of try to cotton wool this whole thing
Yeah.
so that you go away at the end of church thinking, oh, well, it's just about some kind of internal stuff that I have to get right, some kind of psychological bits of furnishing in me that aren't quite right.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and it's nothing really to do with world history or anything out there, because we don't think about that sort of stuff. And if we do, we're probably, a bit on the woo-woo crazy side.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's consumerism, isn't it? And this is the thing I think, as one of the probably one of the besetting sins of the national church, and something that we, I think, as vicars need to guard against in our own heart, in our own ministry, is mollycoddling people, because it's easier to do so, quite frankly. So you do something like that, you affirm people in exactly the kind of thing that Christ is talking about in this passage, in them just getting on with their everyday life, maybe coming to church on Sunday, maybe every once in a while, having a kind of what would you call it? A kind of a frisson of spirituality, a kind of a little dabble in the spiritual life when they come to church, but essentially they go out there back into their lives and they just live like anyone else and have exactly the same priorities as anyone else.
Yeah, there were sort of Ovaltine Christians.
Yeah.
We have that was nice. That kind of warmed me up a bit.
Yes.
But that's sort of life for the rest of the week, rather than what I think the Gospels are saying is, do not order your life around uh, this kind of normalcy
Yes.
narrative.
Yes. 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 Which is interesting, isn't it? We're going to talk about. I mean, I almost feel like want to talk about it now, but we're going to talk about a bit of that later on in
I think we are, isn't there? Lots of
yeah.
things we're talking about today are connecting up in a
Yes.
really interesting way. I've been reading, so I shouldn't say this, but I'm using it as a book. I'm using it to lift up my laptop, but John Lennox's God, AI, and the End of History,
Right.
his commentary on the Book of Revelation is really good,
Right.
actually.
Okay. Interesting.
He's clearly having a bit of a moment in the last few years where he is picking up some of the things that you're saying, and
Mm.
about the vanity of human beings to think that we can create something that could easily find its own agency.
Yeah. We should get
uh,
him on the show, shouldn't
and
we?
defeat. Yeah, I so wished he'd been there on Saturday. because I'd have tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You've got to come on to
Yeah.
Irreverent."
Okay.
Do you know, there's a quote Andy Lyon from Hodder and I were talking about last week. Peter Thiel, the technologist. I know he's a controversial figure, but
Yeah.
he's been doing lots of stuff on the Antichrist. I think he's now practicing Christian.
Yeah.
Sort
It's
of,
kind of a bit
yeah. It's
ambiguous.
all a bit kind
Yeah.
of but murky. But he has come out with this amazing quote, I think, anyway. But which takes verse 36. But of the day and the hour, no man know the angels, but only the Father knows. And he says, well, we don't know the day, we don't know the hour, but I think we're beginning to see the century.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
that whether you kind of take that as wherever you sit with that, I thought that's interesting that someone from Silicon Valley is seeing the movement of history at a different pace.
yeah. And that is actually scriptural as well, because Christ gives us signs by which to watch. So I think that's right. I think we don't know the precise moment, but there are signs which we are told we must observe. You know, like when Christ tells people, he rebukes people for not understanding the signs of the times. That's true for the eschaton as well. You know, otherwise he wouldn't say all this stuff just immediately before. You know, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be dark and the moon won't give its light. Blah blah blah. And there's all sorts of other things that he says in this passage as well. Obviously, it's quite complicated because part of it's about the as part of it is about the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple as well. So that the discourse is complicated, but nevertheless, there are definitely signs that Christ speaks about. And of course, there's the Book of Revelation and various other apocalyptic passages. But we should move on, Daniel, because some of this stuff will come up as we continue talking. But the first thing I wanted to talk about today is really just to go right back to the beginning of the podcast and just to talk about the COVID Enquiry findings that have come out. So, I mean, it's a bit of a non-entity really, because this inquiry that was conducted by Baroness Hallett, apparently it cost, how much did it cost? Something like
230 million.
some crazy amount of money. But the whole thing is kind of predicated upon the assumption that the measures that were forced upon us, the sort of compulsory measures, I actually forget most of the language now, I've sort of blocked out of my mind, but basically that these were effective. And if lockdowns, for example, or other non-lockdown measures had been brought in earlier, then we could have, avoided a lockdown or whatever it might be. So these are things like contact tracing, what's now being called self-isolation. I don't remember it being called self-isolation before. It was something else, wasn't it? I can't remember. It's probably some kind of Orwellian shift in language. Face coverings and various face coverings, masks in other words, and various other things. Like these are just all assumed to be effective, and basically the thrust of the inquiry is that if these things had been put in place earlier and more diligently, then we could have avoided people dying. We could
I think the figure being thrown around is 26,000 people would have survived had the Conservative government gone in harder and faster sooner.
Yeah, based on modelling, of course, computer modelling. And
by Professor Neil Ferguson.
Yeah, exactly. Our friend Neil Ferguson.
Of fame. Yes, he took the lockdowns personally very seriously as well.
Yes, he was very
like
serious.
Matt Hancock. They were very, very hands-on.
Very serious, hands-on approach to lockdown. Absolutely. No hypocrisy or lack of seriousness there at all. There's a very good article by David Frost in the Telegraph where he basically, I mean, David Frost is diplomatic. We know him personally, and he's actually a very good friend of the show. He's a very diplomatic man, and I have to say he doesn't normally speak or write in the way that he does in this article, but he's very, very forthright in it, because I think partly he was behind the scenes. He was watching what was going on, and he knows that a lot of this is complete and total nonsense that's being pushed upon us. The basic presuppositions of the approach to COVID have not been challenged in this report. So it doesn't matter if you spend, it's actually 192 million. It doesn't matter if you spend 192 million pounds on the report. If you don't if you don't fundamentally question your assumptions coming into such a thing, there's basically no point in making such a report because you haven't actually established that the measures that were put in place in the first place are effective. And if they're not, then the whole report is a load of nonsense, which is, of course, what lots of people think. One of the things I
Yeah.
wanted to pull out, and I'll let you speak in a minute, but one of the things I really want to get in here is something that Frost writes in this article, right? Just so he says here, I'm just trying to find, I've actually tweeted this out. He said that he was in a meeting where he was told, so this is slightly before he quit. Actually, I'm just going to find my tweet. So he wrote, and measures were taken to scare people. Indeed, a turning point for me was being in a meeting in mid 2020, in which we were told, presumably, that masks had no meaningful effect, but should be required anyway, quote, to remind everyone that we were in a pandemic. And I just want to pause there, right? Because I remember I was in a car park in Sainsbury's. I was in a Sainsbury's car park, and I remember hearing on the radio Boris Johnson coming out and saying the scientific evidence around masks is now showing us that they are more effective than we thought, and now we have to all start wearing them, and they're going to be compulsory. I can't remember what stage, in shops or whatever, in churches, blah blah blah. So they were, I mean, we knew this anyway. Laura Dosworth has exposed this in her book. In some ways we knew this anyway, and anyone who didn't, is maybe going to have a bit of a wake up call. But the fact you've got somebody like Lord Frost who was actually in a room when they were saying this, and this is the hypocrisy of it that really gets to me. They were literally conspiring together to lie to the British public. So they lied to the British public, and then they say to people, "Oh, you're engaging in conspiracy theories." And they were saying any conspiracy theory is just absolutely outrageous. You just need to listen to us. But there's literally a conspiracy to lie to the British people, and then they gaslight us by telling us that we're engaging in conspiracy theories when we all knew what they were doing anyway. It's just
I think we remember when he came on our shows. He's saying that you go into 10 Downing Street and everybody's taking their masks off.
Yeah, exactly.
That no one, no one's really bothering with this or taking this.
Yeah, and
Daniel, in the way that
yeah.
outside that door, everybody else. I mean, I can remember in Dartford Sainsbury's being chased by a security guard. I'm trotting faster and faster with my trolley as this woman with a stick, Jamie, is chasing me because I've taken the wrong entrance on the masking tape journey as I've come in. And she's literally trotting, and we're both trotting, and I could see this happening because I thought this is quite funny. I'm just going to go faster and faster with the trolley till she, out of breath, catches up with me to tell me you appreciate you went down the wrong directions of the aisle. Arrows are there for a purpose because no one is safe until everyone is safe.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think about the mask thing, just go back to that for a second. I think what was done is fundamentally immoral, not just because they were lying, which they were, but they were also trying to scare people. They were using it as a symbol of fear in order to scare people, in order to get them to comply with whatever it is that they wanted to do. And the other thing I'd like to say about this, if we consider the hysterical response from the Church of England around masks, particularly how everyone was, forced to wear a mask. I didn't do it. I never wore a mask. Thankfully, I was never forced to, and many laity refused to as well, and they had every right to, and they were completely right to, in my opinion. But the hysterical response, bishops, priests, like masking themselves up, taking photos of themselves, putting it on social media. Now, obviously they were doing it in good faith. They presumably didn't know these people were lying, but they've been they've been duped by these people. They are being made to look like fools because they believed this nonsense and they weren't using their critical faculties to interrogate what was being said. We don't have to just believe anything the government says. And a lot of the time we've got good reason not to, because they prove themselves over and over again to be liars.
Yeah, and it's extraordinary, isn't it? Because this is the denomination that is supposedly, high intellect. And yet you have Welby there with 2 masks and a face visor, giving, basically giving communion with a 10-foot tong. Well, I make out a 10-foot tong. He didn't do that, but or
It's a kitchen tongs.
like this, you know. Uh,
Oh man, it is a
and
joke.
you're like,
It's a joke.
what are you doing? Come
Yeah,
on.
it's a complete.
Yeah, I mean, the depressing thing, Jamie, is that probably 75% of the British population don't give a damn about the inquiry, giving the results it does.
Yeah,
And if this all happened again next week, would be clutching pearls, wanting a harder, faster lockdown. It would be even more digitally
yeah.
suppressive. Um, and very few would blink about it. I suppose what you could say is that those of us who would rebel against that would be wiser and smarter,
Mm.
but a large portion of the British public probably agree with the report.
Well, yeah, they probably do because they've just been brainwashed, haven't they, by the media?
And a
You're
culture
probably
of
right.
safetyism, a culture which, where we have created a late modernity society that is happy to exchange liberty for comfort.
Yeah. Just to go back to what I was talking about earlier, the apocalyptic passages, I actually can't remember the exact reference, but the discourse, the Olivet discourse in Luke, where it talks about, false antichrists, false Christs appearing in Christ's name and saying, I am he, the time is near, all this sort of stuff. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things about these passages is that they don't say some secular Messiah is going to turn up. They actually say it's going to be people who turn up in Christ's name. And they say, I am he, I'm here, the time is now, etc., etc. So it's going to be done in Christ's name. It's going to be done in the name of goodwill and morality and even spirituality. And my question to people who just blindly go along with what the media and the government say is, how are you actually going to discern truth from error when things like this happen? If you just go along with it, if you don't interrogate it, if you don't think to yourself, like, are these people lying just on a basic level? We know that people lie. We know that the media lie. We know that the government lies. Are they lying? Are they trying to deceive me? Are they telling me that I must do or believe something that's contrary to my faith? And that's the
Well,
thing.
I remember Douglas Murray in 2019 giving an interview where he said, we're long overdue a new religion.
Mm, yeah,
Uh, and we're long overdue political movements that have a religiosity,
mm,
that have a claim over our hearts and souls. And maybe the next one will be a real mammoth. It will devour everything in its path in terms of our obedience and that.
well, it
And
could be
yet
the
we've,
religion of the Antichrist, couldn't it?
yeah, and I remember listening to that at the time, thinking, yeah, I could see that we could easily in the in the name of a supposed spiritual reassurance and comfort, and a meaning crisis, easily follow
Yeah.
some new kind of gospel, maybe some twisted version of Christianity, um, that is all consuming and
Yeah.
destroys everything in its path, intellectually, spiritually, and yeah, consigns us to our rooms because that's the safe place to be.
Yeah, well, it will be in response to a supposed global crisis, won't it? It will be a pandemic, it will be climate change, it will be some kind of economic crisis or some kind of war or something like that. And we'll be told that we all have to band together as a worldwide community and we have to follow the rules and just give complete obedience to whoever is in charge, essentially. And this is the worry that I have, is that if something actually happened like that, which it does really, to me, it seems that I know people have different views about this, but like to me, it does seem quite clear what Christ is saying, what Scripture predicts. Are we going to be in a spiritually alert enough to resist and to I said on one of our signal groups the other day, not to put too fine a point on it, but that my concern would be that many of our bishops in the Church of England would be first in line to receive the mark of the beast if the mark of the beast were forced upon us. And I don't want to be disrespectful of our bishops, but this is my concern. If something like this actually happened, if the mark of the beast actually came about, and we were told, look, you either take this mark upon yourself, or you'll be locked out of the worldwide economic system because you're not complying. Would we actually be spiritually discerning enough to recognize what was going on, or are we so ignorant of the scriptures, so ignorant of the apocalyptic warnings that are given to us in scripture, and just so lacking in discernment in
Yeah.
general that we would just be led astray?
Well, it's the Reverend Strake, isn't it? In Hideous Strength, the
Yeah,
vicar who joins the nice
yeah.
and that secret society that looks to advanced humanity, and he's so evangelistic about it. It's and you can see how Lewis was seeing that in the post-war society. That there
Very
were many
insightful.
clergy who said, well, we have to put aside, firm belief because we've had experiences of ideology that have put firm belief on us, and we need to progress with science, and this is God working through and embrace it. And if we're not, we're Luddites. We're in the way of progress, and there is that type of clergyman who I think falls into that trap.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Daniel, let's move on slightly because I mean all of this is related, isn't it? So there's been a lot of talk this week about an article that was in the Telegraph. Well, let's take both of these things at once, shall we? So an article in the Telegraph that was about Kate Bottley, who is I suppose you would call her a kind of celebrity vicar. And the headline says, Kate Bottley, all my vicar friends watch The Traitors, which is a reality TV show, I think, shout at their kids and have sex. A number of people have made funny jokes about, oh, all at the same time. That must be difficult. And then
Yeah.
there's a sort of long sort of article about her. It's hard to sort of know how to sort of tie it together thematically. And to be fair, I just want to say at the beginning, like I don't think everything that she says in this article is that awful. I think it could actually be a lot worse. Some of the stuff she says about pastoral care and stuff like that, I think is absolutely fine. Um, but I think the sort of backlash against this is to lots of people, what it looks like is that Kate Bottley is essentially, well, she's saying a couple of things, isn't she? Or at least this is the impression she's giving. She's trying to say that like vicars are just normal people like everyone else. We're just human beings, and we don't really have, well, our lives are kind of normal. They're ordinary. We do the same things as everyone else. She at one point she talks about doubts. I have doubts as well, just like everyone. So there's this very much like, we're the same as everyone else. We're not different. We're just, we're all trying to kind of muddle along together. So there's definitely that sort of thing. And then I think the other thing, which is something particularly has rubbed people up the wrong way, is that she's also kind of saying that we are, by being like this, defying convention and people's expectations. And we're being sort of, we're surprising people with how normal we are as vicars. People are expecting us to be very stuffy and traditional, but we're actually really normal. And a lot of people have pointed out that that's actually not what people are expecting from vicars at all today. They're expecting exactly this because the Vicar of Dibley was 30 years ago. And
Mm.
actually, if you're a little bit more theologically informed, you'll actually know that this sort of stuff started in the 60s, with vicars, liberalizing their theology, number one, obviously, but then also doing things like going to sort of discos and, this sort of early types of music that were influenced by the Beatles and things like that, going to clubs and going to, motorbike meetings and all of this sort of stuff. That actually started in the 60s. So this sort of view that like we're being different by being so normal and doing the things that normal people do, that's actually been going on for ages now. It's been going for about 60 years, and it's coincided with the catastrophic decline in membership of the Church of England. So it just
Yeah, I think, you could say the Trendy Vicar began with that skit by Alan Bennett in
yeah.
That Was the Week That Was, where the vicar attempts from the pulpit. I mean, it's brilliantly done by Bennett
Mm.
to try to seem to be edgy, and
Yeah.
it's sort of cringeworthy.
Yeah.
As you say, people have tried this. I've tried this approach for the last generation a bit. It's very much coming, I think, from the boomer types,
Yes.
and probably a bit from my generation. But I think the new demand upon us is probably for clergy to be clergy mainly, presenting themselves to the public. That this is this is an urgent moment,
Yeah.
really, and I think that the danger is putting things in the way from people receiving pastoral care.
Yes.
And what are the boundaries between that? I mean, doctors, in a sense, are very good at this. Doctors avoid being your friend so
Yes.
that they can apply the correct um, pastoral clinical approach to you.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, there's a point where you have to ask is there a sacrifice I have to make where I'm your parish priest first rather than your friend, because that's what you need.
Mm.
Um, I mean, each of us have to work out our own way with our, personalities and whatnot, and more extroverty types will do things differently. I mean, there is a place for you might say, for the clown in Christian tradition. Um, I think the clown can actually be quite subversive. I mean, if you and I decided during the lockdowns to um, do clownish anti-lockdown stuff, we wouldn't have been seen as so relevant with it
Mm.
then, would we? But my gut feeling is that article showed that she hasn't really got the quiet revival vibe. I think where people are looking for a priest and for their clergy, for their pastors to be much more in touch with the transcendent and the mystical.
Yeah.
And they're not too worried about, whether they watch The Traitors.
Yeah. I mean, I would say they don't want a priest who, I mean, there's all sorts of things here which I find just inimical, to be honest with you. So, like, for a start, like people want a spiritual guide, right? They don't want somebody who just says, well, I'm just like you and we're all the same, right? They're looking for somebody with, I hate this word, but like expertise, right? So somebody like they come to you or me and they say, look, I got this question about the church or I've got this question about the Bible. They want an answer, right? They don't want you just to say, oh, I don't know. Let's have a conversation about it because I'm full of doubt and ignorance. And sorry, my printer's making loads of noise. All of that stuff. They don't want those things. And also, I would say as well, it's like with this younger generation, I think something that's not understood a lot of the time by the older generations is like people, especially these young men, they're looking for people who have a seriousness about their lives, right? So that's I think why people listen to things like Jordan Peterson and particularly people like Andrew Huberman and other people like that is because they look at these people and they think these people are serious people. Even if you don't believe what they believe and have the same outlook, there's a seriousness about them. They're committed to something in their lives. Their lives are moving in a particular direction, and they're intentionally pursuing something with passion and belief. And I think that's what people want from the church. They want conviction, they want discipline, they want seriousness. They don't want like some vicar. I mean, there's an image of, and to be fair, obviously it's up to the people in the Telegraph what it's up to the Telegraph editors, what is put in this article, obviously. But there's a picture of Kate Bottley with her husband on Gogglebox, in her dog collar, with their dog and watching TV. And all right, there's nothing wrong with watching TV. I watch TV, but that's not the projection I want to give to the world when I'm in this mode. I don't want to be communicating to people, I'm lazy, I like chilling out all the time. I'm just like you. I lack discipline, blah blah blah. That's not what people are looking for. And I'm not sure it ever has been. Maybe it has. Maybe it was more effective at some point, but it's definitely not effective now. And it's not what people want. Particularly, I would say these people in the younger generation, particularly these young men who are part of this kind of quiet revival thing. This kind of thing is going to turn them off 100%. It's
Yeah,
the
I think they're
opposite
wanting
effect.
to, the generation coming up can recognize who's a mountain climber, who's not,
Yeah,
who has the sunburnt face and the craggy skin, who looks worn
yeah,
through the spiritual adventure,
yeah,
um, uh, who, like Moses, can descend from the mountain glowing
yeah,
to the point where you think, if I lifted the veil, this would be terrifying.
yes, yeah,
Uh, and I've met men and women like that, and there is a sense in which they are awesomely terrifying, and
mm,
you leave thinking, I've just met someone really profound,
yeah,
and that's going to stay with me for a very long time.
yeah. And it
And
doesn't even have to be in the church, does it? Well, that's the point I'm making. It's like there's a seriousness which certain people have where you take them seriously. And it's because they believe in what they're doing. That's the thing. This thing of that, I don't even really believe in it. Aren't I relatable? It's just nonsense. It's nonsense. You wouldn't say that about a doctor or a lawyer, or if somebody was going to operate and do it's a heart transplant or something like that, or if somebody was going to represent you and you were going to be sent to prison for the rest of your life unless they were successful, they wouldn't say, oh yeah, I'm just like you, man. I don't really know how to do a heart transplant, but I'll give it a try. You'd be like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to have dedicated your life to learning how to do this, and now you're telling me you don't know. I mean, what is that? I just don't. Why is that acceptable for vicars to be like that? I really just don't get it at all.
yeah, and sometimes as well, it's putting yourself in the way of the gospel.
Yeah.
Over time, I've come to appreciate ad orientem celebrations of the Eucharist.
Yes.
I wasn't initially. I was generally more somebody who would do people facing
Yeah.
presidency.
Hmm.
And I like both equally. Each has their place. But I do find increasingly that ad orientem,
So facing east. So facing
facing east,
away from the people.
is
Yeah.
is putting me in the right place before God along with the congregation. And it's not about me. It's not about my personality, which I think a lot of uh, clergy fell into the trap when the altars were changed around, particularly after the Second Vatican Council. It became about, the Father Daniel show.
Mm.
Uh, and
Yeah.
we forgot the words of John the Baptist, he must increase so that I must decrease. That's not to say that we should have celebrations that, are totally inhuman or whatever, but there is something quite powerful about us all facing the same way. And
Yeah.
then it's, a priest is a priest is a priest. There's nothing, if you can't see me in this respect fully, in this, because we're all in the same direction, it's not about me or my quips or my personality for that time. It can be in the sermon.
Yeah.
We can draw some of that, we can include some of that, but yeah, I've increasingly found that useful, and there's a bit in the Rule of Benedict about, isn't it, about monks mustn't be essentially practs in the in the community, going around doing loads of jokes and whatever. I mean, Benedict's words sound rather hard. It's like the monk must not laugh, but I think what he
I think
means
that's one of the rungs of the ladder of humility.
isn't it? Yeah, is we should hold back. And I've got a quick wit. And I think it's very easy in situations to make smart ass comments. And
Yeah.
I think actually, when I do that in a priestly capacity, what I'm doing is I'm putting myself in the way of maybe what is a pastoral counseling opportunity. And I should just hold back. And I find myself I've tried to get in the discipline of biting my lip and
Mm.
saying, no, that isn't doing anything
Yeah.
for this person. It's doing a lot for you and your ego. It's sort of making you fill the room, but actually you need to just diminish yourself a bit
Yeah.
to allow the spirit to work through you. And you need to shut up.
Yeah. And also the other thing is like a number of people have been pushing back on this on Twitter and saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with laughter and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think anyone would really say there's anything wrong with laughter. I mean, this podcast is, clearly humorous and, frequently hilarious, I'm sure. But the fact is like humor has a place, doesn't it? And in the pastoral life, humor has a place as well. I have jokes with my parishioners all the time, but I think the problem is when you sort of sense that there's nothing beneath that. There's not a sort of substrate beneath the humor. And really all the vicar is a kind of clown who's there to entertain you. And humor can often be used as a way of creating a veneer so that you can't actually penetrate beneath the surface. Lots of funny people are like that. They're very funny. They tell lots of jokes and they're even quite good socially. But actually, the humor is a defense mechanism. It's to stop you going deeper. It's to stop you going beyond something. And that's not a great use of humor in general. It's certainly not a great use of humor in a pastoral sense. I think lots of
Yeah.
sermons are like that. Like I never tell jokes in my sermons. I used to try and do it. I mean, I'm not very good at anyway, but like I never tell jokes in my sermons for that reason. It might be that humor might arise naturally in some other way, unintentionally, but I never ever write jokes or try and say anything humorous because I don't want to give that impression to people that I'm here to make them laugh and that I'm here to entertain them. I'm not. I'm like a postman delivering the letters. Like it's not for me to like, to write on the letters or to tell a joke while I'm doing it or try and entertain people. It's like this is the letter. Here it is. It's not about me. I'm not here to
Uh,
entertain you.
and I think if for curates in training, my advice has been to bank on giving people time. People appreciate you
Yeah.
giving time, whatever your personality is. Um, that cannot be underrated, actually. Don't be locked behind a desk all day. Go out and meet people,
Mm.
spend time, whatever, whether you're a naturally effervescent personality or not, that people will appreciate, the shy, prayerful, maybe priest who just gives of his or her time is important and warmth more than humor, warmth actually,
Yeah.
and
Well,
actually just giving folks a sense that this is out of your prayer life comes a compassion for them.
yes.
I think more than yes, sometimes there is place for disarming humor, but not all that not one way that it kind of dominates everything. And we've all seen that. And we've seen that even in clergy chapters. There are certain types whose voices raise and that they fill a room
Mm.
in not a particularly helpful way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, Dan, we've talked about that quite a lot. So let's just move on now. We want to talk about another thing, which was an article on BBC about why Tommy Robinson supporters are turning to Christianity. And to be honest, I did something on this, Christian nationalism in inverted commas a few weeks ago when I was by myself covering this a report that was done on Sky News around it. And we did have a little chat about it on Uncollared as well. But I think we were sort of saying that it's strange how in the only the last sort of month or so this phrase Christian nationalism has started to be used in the mainstream media. Obviously, it was a phrase that we were aware of beforehand. Anyone who's conversant in this area would have heard this phrase many times. But it started to be reported on in the mainstream media, and this BBC article and various other reports on this have been suggesting, I think anyway, and you tell me what you think, but they've been suggesting that the kinds of people who have started to come to churches, particularly Church of England churches, are posing a problem or a dilemma, actually, I think is the word that's used in this article, a dilemma for the church, because now well, obviously people want the church want people to come to church, but now it's almost like the wrong kind of people are coming to church. These people are, right wing, they are nationalists, they are the articles don't quite go quite this
Mm.
far, but they're racist, they're patriarchal, they've got very backwards ideas. They're certainly not progressive liberals. They tend to be men as well, and they're the kind of people who might attend a Tommy Robinson rally in London. So of course they must be the worst kind of people in the world for this reason. And so now the church has a dilemma. What do we do? These people are coming, but they've got all these wrong beliefs, so we need to re-educate them or whatever it might be. What is your sort of response to this, Daniel? How do you sort of see all of this stuff emerging in the media?
Yeah, I saw some twitching about this at Speak Life, and the term Christian nationalist was brought up. And I'm still struggling to know what exactly this term means. I mean, I think Glenn Scrivener rightly said the word nationalism does have a bit of a different sense in America than it does to Britain. If we think of the Church of England is the national church.
Hmm.
And what is it known as the national church? It's known for, being um, benign,
Hmm.
fuzzy, lovely, and approachable, with prayers for the monarch. And it's not seen as some kind of far right organization. um, uh, and so do these words actually transport? I mean, it strikes me it's being used in a slur, and the danger obviously is a sort of Hillary Clintonization
Yeah.
of terms, where this becomes another set of deplorables.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's
I mean,
definitely the way they're being presented in this
yeah,
article and
yeah.
elsewhere.
I mean, the irony, of course, the gospel is we're all sinners, we're all deplorables.
Mm,
There is no health in us, as the prayer book starts.
mm,
We're all a band of sinners coming to the mercy of the Redeemer. Uh, that there isn't one set that's more deplorable than another. All can equally access the grace of God if we come seeking His mercy. So we're not, in other words, we're not meant to close the door on anybody who says, I turn to Christ.
mm, mm.
Um, uh,
Yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it, when he talks about a dilemma? I just wonder what the dilemma actually is. Is it like, should we let them in or not? Is that the dilemma? What
yeah,
dilemma?
and I mean, I think there's been a very one-dimensional reading of the whole issue of refugees, asylum, and immigration
Mm,
within the sort of Anglican landscape at the moment in this country. We look at the passages which rightly call us to love the stranger, um, and those are important passages, just as love the enemy is a crucial part of the gospel. But nevertheless, you can't avoid that the pretty much the whole corpus of the Old Testament is about the building of a godly society and how that project fails, because of a sort of multiculturalism.
yes, because of
That, that
assimilation.
that Israel reverts to its old ways, or that it happily imports into its cities those who would worship heathen, heathen shrines and whatnot. Um, that there is a coherence that Israel is struggling to find in the Old Testament, and it seeks the Messiah to bring restitution and sanity and God's kingdom, and right up to the last book of the Old Testament, that struggle is still there, isn't it? And it's such a big part
Yeah.
of the Old Testament, and
Yeah.
yet that's never really explored.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting, isn't it? Because what these people will often do is they'll quote the Old Testament, which seems to me to be definitely not the way theologically. If I was going to try and be pro-immigration, I definitely wouldn't quote the Old Testament for this reason, because they say, oh, it says in the Mosaic Law, welcome the stranger. But as Dwayne Miller was on my podcast recently, an expert Anglican vicar who's an expert in Islam, and engaging the Islamic world. But we were talking about this, and he was saying, in the Old Testament, when it says welcome the stranger, it also says that the stranger has to convert to the religion of Israel and they have to be circumcised. So, if that's a completely different thing to saying, well, we should just have a sort of open border immigration policy. Because if you actually took that seriously, you would say people who come to this country, I mean, if you take this line, I'm not saying this, but if they come to this country, they have to convert to Christianity. But nobody's saying that, and nobody should say that because that would be an absurd thing to say. So you can't just take one verse in isolation out the whole, as you rightly say, Daniel, the whole context of the Old Testament. Say, well, it just says welcome the stranger. Case closed. It's so superficial. It's unbelievably superficial.
Yeah, and you can see that Israel is struggling with the divine vision that this country is to be the light to enlighten the Gentiles.
Exactly, yeah.
That the moral law is not just particular but universal. The Ten Commandments given are truths for the whole of humanity. They're not just particular to the Hebrews for a little bit. This is how God envisages that we live in partnership with him. And so to say, well, yeah, you can come and join us, but don't worry about that. You just bring your own laws and commandments. We'll somehow work out how we can have two societal operating systems, or three or four, all kind of, working around. And the only truth we'll have is that there's no real truth or story, bar the fact that we're all just trying to get along with each other. And I think, well, that's a big ask. And I don't think anyone's ever tried that before. Well, Israel did try it and fell into disaster.
It's a theological stretch, isn't it, to try and read that into the Old Testament? Let's put it that way. Dan, we have to move on because we're going to run out of time. So we're going to do two things. We're going to talk about abolishment of jury trials very briefly, and then we've got a nice email which I'd like to. We've actually got two emails. We'll probably only get to do one of them today. Hold the next one over until next week, but or when we can get to it. But perhaps, Daniel, you could just say, I mean, you wanted to talk about this. This has come up in the last couple of days. The abolishment of jury trials. So the right to trial by jury is being, it's mooted to be massively curtailed to essentially very serious crimes like murder in Britain. This has obviously caused quite a lot of controversy. David Lammy is behind it. So, Daniel, what's your comment on this?
And isn't it interesting that in 2020, when the then Conservative government was talking about doing something like this as an expedience during lockdown to hurry through lots of cases because there was a backlog, the then shadow justice minister, David Lammy, who believes that Henry VIII was succeeded by Henry VII. Presumably he was succeeded by Henry VI.
Yes.
We're still waiting for Henry V.
Yes.
Because he hasn't been born yet. But came out with a statement which I think you couldn't disagree with, that trial by jury was a fundamental to the British way of life. But now he seems to have changed his mind in this this leaked document, which is going to cause them something of a headache as the budget is coming up.
Daniel, the precise words, I just like to read them from Twitter. In 2020, David Lammy, Shadow Justice Secretary, said, jury trials are fundamental to our democracy. We must protect them. That's what he said. He's changed
Very wise. When I heard this last night, I was and still am. I was really shook up by this.
Yeah.
Because if you think of, there are lots of cases where a jury can make an enormous difference, and wouldn't it be so easy to have a politicized judiciary who would just steamroll over all sorts of rights and then begin to colour the laws of the nation, because as a country, part of our legal system is this sense of what has been done becomes part of the law as well. What think the way that decisions have been made, that has a big impact on the way that sentences are given. It creates this sort of a sense of precedence, and that's important. But if we have a politicized judiciary, that really starts to lock in some kind of quite troubling decisions. Alison Pearson from the Telegraph has said that Lucy Letby, had she not pleaded guilty for that tweet that she put out, and it had gone to trial by jury, would most likely have won the case.
It's Lucy Connolly, isn't it? Not
Lucy Connolly. Yeah, sorry, Lucy Letby's.
Yeah, the one with the children.
Yeah, you could see lots of decisions where people are being put in prison for maybe 3 to 5 years for essentially political crimes of unorthodoxy. And a jury could, being tried by our peers is probably the right decision in these sort of things. I think, that right for us to say, actually, I'm going to plead not guilty because I have confidence that a jury are going to see this for what this is. This feels like a stitch up, really.
Yeah. Well, it is concerning, isn't it? Because it's part of our constitution. The Magna Carta, this right has been guaranteed since the Magna Carta over 800 years ago. No free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, exiled, or ruined in any way, nor in any way proceeded against, except by the lawful judgment of his peers and the law of the lands. And as you say, particularly when the judiciary is so obviously politicized, politically biased at the moment, so obviously that it's more important than ever that people are tried by ordinary people, and obviously you're never going to get a completely representative set of ordinary people in a jury, but it's a lot better than being tried by a politicized judiciary, politically or ideologically biased or even ideologically possessed judges. In other words, you want ordinary people to try you rather than that. So to say that they want to do this because there's a backlog, because the country's broke and we don't have any money, it is really just terrible when you think about the constitutional damage it's doing. But Danny, we have to move on because we're aiming to finish in about 6 minutes. So what we'll do is I'm going to give a plug and then I'm going to read an email out, and then maybe we'll finish with a prayer. Maybe you could do the prayer, Daniel. I'll give you some advance notice for that. So just to say thank you to people for listening to the podcast. Now, the podcast is supported by you, the listener. If you like the podcast, you want to support it, you want to see it go from strength to strength, please do consider becoming a Patreon or joining our Substack. This involves a very small monthly fee. We always give these episodes for free to everyone. But if you'd like to support us, you can do so. And you do get a bit more as well. You get our bonus podcast, Uncollared, where we talk about things a little bit more deeply, sometimes slightly more behind the scenes or slightly more off the cuff. I'm also doing monthly conversations with Nick Dixon, which we're both sharing on our just for our supporters. So you get those as well, in-depth conversations, frequently hilarious. Speaking of humor, and we release these episodes early as well. So if you support us, you get all of those things, and obviously you get to support us as well, which is really, really important. The podcast costs money. I'm not paid for being a vicar. I make my money doing podcasts and writing and things like that. So it really, really helps. So please do go to our website, reverendpod.com, and become a Patreon. It's a big red button, and that's only £2.50 plus VAT in the UK per month. So it's not very much money. Just at that lower level, you can of course give more if you'd like to, or go to our Substack, which is reverendpod.substack.com. That's a £5 to join there. You get exactly the same stuff. If you'd like to support directly, you can do that as well. irreverentpod@gmail.com, and I can let you have access to all the stuff if you do want to contribute directly. That's a really good way of doing things as well. So irreverentpod@gmail.com. All of that information is in the show notes below the show on podcast or video. So please do consider supporting if you possibly can and enjoy all the extra stuff we give you. Right, I'm going to read out an email which is addressed to me, but I think we could say it's addressed to all of us really here at the podcast here, you Daniel as well, and Tom. So this is from Robert, who lives in New Zealand. So he says, "Hello, my name is Robert, etc. It's a very beautiful part of the world. I'm very grateful to have been born here. My father emigrated from Northern Ireland to New Zealand in the late 1950s, while my mother's family originally came from the south of England in the 1860s. I see my culture as being Judeo-Christian and British-based, and I have a very strong belief that it has brought that has brought more good into the world than evil. I've just finished watching your far-right Christianity special. As usual, it was very good. I've been listening to your podcast on and off for some time. You present your views in a very thoughtful and intelligent way, and I really appreciate the fact that at the core of your discussion is a strong essence of your faith based in the writings and teachings of the Bible. I also appreciate many of the political stances you take, and that you are brave enough to take a stand and call things out when they clearly should be. When I was very young, I was left-wing, and then through the natural evolution of time, I became a centrist. I guess now I'm an extreme right-winger as the centrists move so far left as to be unrecognizable. I do think the West is in a terrible place and we need to dramatically change course. As part of that, Bible-led Christianity needs to be at the center of our lives. I've just joined the Irreverent podcast as a super friend. So that's like a type of supporter on Patreon, as I think it's the least I can do to help you and your family. Speaking to me personally, though, I apologise for taking so long. That's okay, it doesn't matter. I think it's wonderful that you've chosen to take this path and to be a beacon for those of us who are looking for something more substantial from our Christian churches and clergy than what is usually offered. Then he thanks me, and I would say by extension us, and says he's praying for us and so on and so forth. Keep up the good work, keep watch, and keep the faith, from Robert. So thank you very much, Robert. It's a lovely email. Yeah. And I think, one of the things there is that thing about, I think lots of people feel like that, don't they? They feel like their views are not extreme and they're actually quite normal, but they're being told that they've become some kind of extremist when it's actually the context around that has changed, isn't it? It's not even the views. Many people have held these same views for decades. And it's just that things have changed so much that now they've become extreme because of the context. So it's interesting. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening and for watching. And now we're going to finish with a prayer, which Daniel will lead us in.
Okay. Well, last week was Stir Up Sunday, last Sunday. So I'll do the prayer for that and a blessing. Stir up, we beseech thee, O Lord, the wills of thy faithful people, that they, plenteously bringing forth the fruit of good works, may of thee be good, be plenteously rewarded through Jesus Christ our Lord. And may God's peace be with us all, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and as we approach this holy season and forevermore. God bless.
Amen. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time, keep watch.
And keep the faith.